Hello, this is James and Santeri from Wheel, and we are here at Chaoszine.
Okay, so hello everyone, Chaoszine is here at our own studio in Helsinki, Finland. I have James and Santeri from Wheel as guests. How
Hello.
are you guys?
Good, thank you.
It's been quite some time actually that we've met.
Yeah, I think it's been 3 years probably.
I think it was like COVID-ish time.
Yeah, it was over in On the Rocks, I think.
Yeah.
At that point, and
Resilient Human was supposed to be released. And
that was right. Yeah, after many delays.
yeah. And you were having quite rough times also in the personal life.
Yeah, it was just a dark time, I think, for everybody. And interestingly enough, I keep meeting people telling me their own kind of either tragedy or personal mental health stuff they went through during COVID.
Yeah.
And I think just none of us spoke about it to anybody else. So it felt like we were all going through it alone. But I think we all went through it. It was a really rough time. And that's why the album, I think, ended up so dark.
So how is it now?
It's definitely better. Things are going the right way with the bands, definitely. We've got some really exciting stuff happening this year. We're doing our first trip to Australia.
Okay.
Where we're going to support Caligula's Horse. That's going to be really cool. Then we're doing 2 headline tours, one in the US, which is the first time headlining there.
Okay.
And then we're going to be headlining in Europe in the fall and the winter. And it's the most extensive headline run we've ever done. And there's a lot to prepare for it, but it's all good problems to have. Just how do we present the music as well as possible, that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's much better than COVID.
Yeah, I was actually going to say next that now I guess these are like way more positive news than what was in the head when like everything was sort of black in the COVID time.
Oh, definitely. And at least there's a light at the end of the tunnel. When we released that album, it just kind of felt like nothing happened. We were just sweating and stressing out for a year. The album came out and it just felt like nothing because we didn't go and play anywhere. The entire interaction was through social media, and it just felt like a bit of a non-event, which was really weird because when our first album came out, that definitely felt like something happened and it really picks up for us. So it was a bitter pill to swallow, but everyone went through it. Every band went through it. And we're lucky enough to live here where there's at least some support from the state.
Yeah.
And we managed to get back on our feet, although it's not been easy, and we're still going, and if we can get through that, we can probably push on a bit longer.
If you compare now like Resilient Human writing process for this upcoming Charismatic Leaders, which will be out on May 3rd through Inside Out, so how different were the processes now?
I think that the similarity with it was most of it has just been me writing at home again, just due to timetables and a million other small details, most of which I now can't remember. It just ended up that way. And Aki left, of course, our previous bassist during the process. So it was mainly me, Santeri and Jussi just bouncing around emails and a Telegram group, just trying to work out the best way to frame the songs. And yet again, we had no lyrics written when we went to the studio, so we were playing catch up afterwards again.
Okay.
But I think that the writing process was quite similar. I think the production process was the place where it was quite different this time. So
how come?
Maybe you could talk more about that.
Yeah, it was a bit different because we went to Sweden to record the basic tracks. We had a nice studio there with the producer engineer Daniel Bergstrand, and it was a bit different to be in a different environment for the recording process. Unfortunately, that was kind of it was in 2 parts. So we went there to record the drums first, and then we went to the States. It was a great tour, but for the album process, it was a bit distracting to say. But we got it was a good place to record, I would say. Then James was basically working on the vocal bits, like he said, we didn't have any lyrics or hardly any demo vocal melodies before we started tracking all the stuff, which it if you don't know much about the process, it doesn't make it easier, but it was what it was. And during the fall, I think you were pretty much isolated and recording and demoing and writing and recording the vocal bits. That we recorded that with Joonas Parkkonen in Finland. and then it was mixed in Australia by Forster Saville, who also mixed our latest, the last EP that came out in 22. So yeah, it was pretty different, and a lot of you know, also with the writing process, as James mentioned, we were pretty separate for the most of it, like working on our own home studios and rehearsal places and stuff like that. So it was for the next one, I think the plan is to change that a little bit, to be more in the same room for every bit of the process. But let's see. I think considering the album is pretty good, though. You will love it.
So has it always been like that you do the music first and then the lyrics, or have you done the opposite way also in the past? Or
I've never even considered that it was an option to do it the other way around. Like I think we have one idea which might flesh out into a song at the moment, which is a set of lyrics that we've got an idea for a song development, but particularly because of the kind of stuff we write, I always think the mood is kind of created from the sound design and the kind of tempo and the structure sometimes as well. Like if it's a really frantic, frenetic, angry song, I like to pick a frenetic, angry subjects. But then again, counterintuitively, sometimes if something sounds really sad, it can end up with a really happy subject, like we did with Synchronize, for example, on the last EP. But I think it's just you just throw a lot of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. And I don't know if it's the same for other bands, but at least with us, it feels like 90% of what we try doesn't work, and the 10% that does is what we keep. So there's a lot of frustration and a lot of experimentation, trying to get from just, hey, we've got this great riff, to the end where we've got a great song. And our standards are very, very high. So, and again, I know they are for all bands, of course. Just you know, we really live and die by it. And I think sometimes just accepting the fact that the outcome is different to what we imagine in the assembly. Not even like it's worse, just it's different. Like one of the songs on the album, Submission, we've had the first 4 or 5 minutes of music for that more or less composed now for about 3 or 4 years.
Okay.
But the vocals have changed the tone of it dramatically in a way that I didn't really anticipate, and it took me about 2 months after finishing it to decide if I liked it or not. And at this point,
but I must say that normally those songs are the ones that turn out the best in the end, in the long run.
I'm hoping you're right, because we've had a couple like that. It's definitely true for the next single, Porcelain, as well. The vocals were a bit of an uphill battle to get done, and especially the middle part of the song, we really had some trouble coming up with something kind of effortless over this really fiddly, complicated backline groove.
I think something like 5 days before you had to record, you said that I hate this, I hate all of it.
That happens, and even worse, on the last day before I flew to England for the UK, I'd been up until 2 or 3 in the morning working on this stuff at a small writing studio. I went in to record and I still hadn't finished it. There was about 40% of the song I hadn't done. So I just got really lucky in the studio, and Jonas was great to bounce ideas around with. So I was very pleasantly surprised when the record company said they wanted it to be a single, because we just thought we'll just stick that near the back of the album and pretend that didn't happen to start with.
But that's like you're paranoid that you did it in a rush and it turned out
yeah, that's fair.
I think Paranoid was made in that way.
I can believe that, and
yeah,
I think a lot of things are.
I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was like that. They weren't supposed to even do that, and they had to do something in the studio, and they were like, okay, well, let's just write a song, and then it happened. It's the same with Twisted Sisters, We Are Not Gonna Take It, and it wasn't originally supposed to be on the album. But it was the producer that said that, hey guys, you should maybe record it, and the guys were like, no, we don't like it, and that's their biggest song. So
with Fugue, it was kind of a throwaway idea, and we finished it, or I finished writing the idea 2 days before we hit the studio. We had the structure and the arrangement, but Santeri had to come up with the drums for that just on the spot, and Aki had to learn that really difficult bass part just kind of in his spare time around your drum takes. And that's ended up being one of our most streamed songs. So I think there's something kind of comforting in the fact we keep being wrong about what the most popular stuff will be. So we've just stopped thinking about it so much. We're just trying to make the best stuff we can. And the nice thing now is there's a label and they can decide how they want to market it. So we can just focus on making the stuff.
So you've said that this is your heavier album. So does somehow like these times reflect you as a writer? Like obviously we were in dark times when we met last time, but we are still in quite dark times because of that fucking guy in our neighbor country. I don't even want to say his name.
At this point, I almost said which one, because it just feels like everywhere in the world there is some douchebag at the moment making things a bit worse.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'll admit, since January, I've stopped watching the news for the first time in my adult life, and it's wonderful. I've still got my own, stuff to worry about, but we can't do anything about 90% of this stuff.
No.
We're just pawns in a much larger game, and I think there's something really cathartic, at least for now, taking a bit of a break from that, especially while we're doing the album promotion and the rehearsal cycle, just focusing on something else. But I think the reason we went heavy, we kind of went Slipknot with it when they released Iowa, where we just thought, okay, we don't want to do a set-out album, let's go even heavier and just see what happens. And it's the way the music turned out as well. We had quite a few ideas before we started the writing process, all that indicated it was going to be quite heavy. Like, we had a lot of submission written. We had the two separate parts of songs that ended up becoming Empire. We had the main riff of Disciple, and all of it seemed like it was going to be pretty nasty. So we just thought, well, why not? Let's double down. Let's make a really heavy album.
But do you normally like discuss about these kinds of like directions, or do you just let the music lead the way wherever it goes?
It goes where it goes, but at least this time there were a lot of indicators. It's kind of like if a shepherd goes out the night before and looks at the sky and says it's going to rain tomorrow. It seems like it was going to be heavy.
Okay. What about when you were like playing like live shows? Did that affect somehow your like mental writing, or?
I think it's just a natural progression for us. Like, I think moving backwards was quite heavy, and I think Resident Human had very heavy moments, but it was more kind of, I guess, psychedelic than the previous album. And this one is kind of somewhere in between. It's got elements of both, and I think part of it is we're just getting more comfortable with the sound we've developed as a band, and kind of what it is and what our strengths are. So we're just leaning more into both extremes. That there are parts on this album that are extremely heavy, like the ending riff in Empire, for example. It's like the world is ending. It's awesome. And then there are parts like the intro to The Freeze, where it's much more about a mood. And that's the only song on the album we didn't change the title from the demo name, because I started writing it in the winter. It was fucking cold and dark. So I just thought, okay, The Freeze continues. That's what the song's going to be called.
How much do you think about like live situations when you're making music?
Not nearly enough. I think you can talk about this more, because you've got one of the most difficult things to achieve with this.
Yeah, well, regarding the live thing and kind of about what James was talking about just now, is that for this album, I think part of the reason why it's kind of heavier now is that we were kind of missing some spots in the dynamics of a live set. So we were missing a heavier opening song or something like that. So we're kind of filling some blanks in a way, at least. And otherwise for live setup, actually with the drum writing this time, I did consider it. Previously I really didn't. Like stuff like Movement I played it in the studio in small bits, I can admit that, and really playing that live, it took me a year to learn it. Really, it's difficult stuff, and I tried to avoid it this time on this album with some success, I guess, but yeah, there's still bits that are really difficult to do. But also on the new album, although it's heavier than Resident Human for sure, but there's also more of kind of different elements, like jazzy bits and even some pop kind of influenced stuff. So I think we went more to both extremes and just expanding, I would say, and then finding our own way, our own sound more and more.
I was actually going to ask you next, that do you feel that you have already found what is Wheel?
No.
Or do you feel that you're still sort of like searching for it?
I think it's yes and no. The nice thing about this band is it's prog, so at least before I realised as an adult that's a trope, and it's got its own stylistic kind of definitive qualities. When I was a kid, I just thought it meant you can do whatever you like, and it's kind of okay. You don't have to be in this really narrow lane. Like, if you think about like the first few Stereophonics albums back in the 90s, you know, that they have one sound, they stick to it. It's a great sound, but it's one sound.
Yeah.
And you compare it to something like a Smashing Pumpkins record, and there are all these different shades throughout the album. And that always spoke to me more, just because I guess selfishly I'd get bored if we just kept doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And I think in one sense we definitely have a greater awareness of what the band is, what we're capable of doing, and what matters to us. For example, as I'm sure you know, live, most bands use some kind of backing track system these days. And this is not me being negative and throwing shade about these. Leprous use backing tracks and they sound amazing. It's all about how you use it, like any other tool with music. But because so much of our grooves are led by Santeri, we've really tried to keep the click tracks to a minimum. And unless it's something really important, like there's a synth sound, which we really want there, we don't really use it. So I think we've got 2 songs in the set we're really using that stuff these days. And everything else we keep it open so we can kind of move that tempo and keep that flow, like a bit more like the intro to Balls on Parade by Rage Against the Machine, than something more kind of metalcore where it's all very much lined up to the grid.
Yeah.
And you know, for example, that really matters to us, and we've thought a lot about how that should flow throughout a song. At the same time, I think dynamically, we love making these really long, intricate, complex songs, and they take a really long time to write. You end up with an hour or hours of material that you've got to kind of strip down to something which hopefully is going to keep people's attention long enough to listen from the beginning to the end. And that's something I care about a lot. Like, I remember years ago, that I'm going to pick on one of my favourite bands, when Francis the Mute by Mars Volta came out. I think there's about 3 or 4 minutes in the middle of that with seagull noises with some delay on, and I think for me that's the line where it goes too prog. Like the rest of the record is awesome, but I think that bit I just always used to skip past it.
So even you had to skip that part.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've all got our limits, and again, it's really. Santeri doesn't, and that's exactly the point, though. It's a spectrum, and it depends on who you're talking to and who you're asking. But I think for us, we're still trying to keep it all meat and no potatoes with the writing, and that is a fun challenge to process. But you know, for the future, we're looking at mixing up the instruments. I bought a baritone guitar for this album, which was really fun. That's something new we haven't done before. We're looking at some synthesizer stuff for the future. Santeri has just bought a new SPD, which has a load of new functions we haven't used before, and it increases the possibilities of things we can do live. So we're always looking for just, what can we add to the soup that's going to make it more interesting without diluting it. And it's an endless process, and I think that's the fun part. We don't know where it's going to go next.
In terms of the album's lyrics, is there like a theme or concept, or is it just like separate songs, or?
As always, we've ended up where like 2/3 of it has a theme, and there are just 2 outliers which don't.
Okay.
And the theme ones, it's about the album title, Charismatic Leaders, which is historically a term used to describe somebody in charge of a cult. And I keep seeing people using these conversational or public speaking tactics in other walks of life. Like, for example, in politics, we see people with their own cult-like followings that will defend them bitterly. We see it with figureheads in business. We see it with companies. Like, have you tried telling someone who loves Apple that there's a problem with the software on their phone? Like, it's like you shot their mother in the face.
Yeah.
And the point being, I'm not judging the behaviour. I think it's human, but it's interesting to observe that and try and wonder, why do we do that? Why do we form these kind of defensive teams to protect these things which are not ourselves, they're not our immediate families, but we identify with these people, these characters, these avatars that are created. So that ended up being the backbone of quite a few of the tracks. I think Empire falls into that. That one's about media empires and how they affect pretty much everything in our everyday lives. And I don't think there's ever been a time that has been more apparent than during COVID, when for all of us, the world shrank to the size of our phone screens.
Yeah.
And, everything you saw for the rest of the world was someone else interpreting something that was happening and then showing you their interpretation of it through a screen. Yeah. And, in good faith, there's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is, it's not always in good faith.
Yeah.
And stuff is often misquoted or misrepresented, and that
Yeah,
leads
people do that also on purpose.
It's absolutely the point, exactly.
Yeah.
So we end up thinking people who disagree with us, the very worst version of them, the most extreme, the most deluded, the most conspiratorial, that represents the whole, and that is very rarely the case. Like, if you think about all the people you've ever met, how many of them behave like that? Because I can think of maybe 2 I've met in my life that really fit that category of being, just a lunatic.
Yeah.
But we believe it's a larger percentage of people than it actually is, because we see them speaking online. They are disproportionately represented in that means, and the way news covers certain things, that also adds to this misunderstanding of statistics and how many people represent these views. I just really went down the rabbit hole on this, and specifically after Fox News got sued by the voting machine company last year, and they lost an incredible amount of money. It was over $700 million, because they lied and said the voting machines didn't work and the election was stolen. I'm going to call it what it is, pretty much staging a coup in America and trying to overthrow the government. And the head of the company was able, I think he's now selling Fox News, and there are no consequences. And he's acting like he had no idea what was being said on his platform. And I'm going to call it here today, people, that's bullshit. He knew.
Yeah, most likely.
But of course he did. I mean, it's his company. Where's that messaging coming from? It's either him or it's one of his closest allies. So anyway, that's probably made sure this isn't going to get broadcast on lots of mediums, so now I can speak more freely. Disciple was specifically about 2 people in a cult, one of who's still in the cult and one who's left. And both of them, they can only see through their own frame of vision, and neither are willing to listen to the other one. So they feel attacked, and one of them is convinced he's trying to save the other person's life, and the other person is a bit less dramatic about it, just thinks his friend should leave the cult. And it's just this idea that we reduce things to these binaries. You can swallow your disbelief, or you can struggle in vain, and you get to decide. And there's more nuance than that in the world. So that's the kind of concepty part. And the less concepty bit was more just about personal growth, I guess. Like Saboteur was about my frustration at trying to complete the lyrics to the album. And, I talk a really big game about my values and how I feel about art, but I felt like a hypocrite and a charlatan because I just couldn't deliver on this stuff. And that was it ended up being about self-acceptance and forgiveness towards the end, because I also think that's fundamentally human. And with art, there's never a straight line. There's always, you need a different road for every song. I could go on about this more, but I feel like I've spoken for quite a long time, so I'm going to stop there.
After releasing the album, how does the future look?
We are, like James said, we are touring the States for the first time as headliner starting in May 2nd, just one day before the album will be released, and then European dates in later this year. And other plans are not confirmed yet, but I think we will place some more dates both in Europe and the US around this album cycle. So could be more dates coming in for this year, definitely something for next spring, but too early to speak about it because it hasn't been announced yet. So there's going to be touring involved, definitely.
Is US like more of a priority for you now with this album? Do you feel that you want to go more to the States now?
That's a good question. Do you want to do that one?
Yeah, I can do it. Yeah. I think at the moment, it's a good question for sure. But I think at the moment it's somehow a priority because it's a bit different kind of market than the Europe is, because it's a huge country with tons of cities to play.
Yep.
And also it's for a European band starting their American career, it's really expensive.
It is.
So it makes a lot of sense to kind of focus on it for a while, at least for a couple of years, to go there.
Play as much as you possibly can.
Exactly.
There.
So it really doesn't make any sense to do one tour in the US than wait for the next album for the next one. So we really have to grind it, and I think it is the biggest market for this kind of music. Of course, we have a lot of fans in Europe as well, and we are growing in Europe. And but at the moment, I would say that the focus is slightly on US. So
I think there's a practical reason too, which back when we went there the first time, our manager has said to us from the start, if you're going to start touring in the US, you need to go a minimum of 3 times in 18 months. Otherwise, you might as well set fire to a pile of money, and it just does nothing.
Yeah, most likely it is like that.
But I think it is, and we've now got a US agent. It feels like we've really done the roughest part, and we've now got a small foothold over there. And it's not like we're topping the billboards with this kind of music.
No. But
we have a market and we have an audience, and we definitely have the connections now to make it work as a business, and it's getting better all the time. And in Europe, I mean, of course, Europe's a priority for us. We love Europe, and touring here is amazing. And at the moment, the reason we've left it so late in the year is just because we wanted to do a longer run, and the only way we could kind of fit all of these places in the same kind of venue sizes within this amount of time, the earliest we could do it was kind of towards the mid of November. But that tour is going to be amazing. We're pretty excited, and the nice thing is the US is going to be like the canary in the mine. If that's the test run and we can see if the stuff works live, then we get to come back and realise it didn't, and we can spend 6 months fixing it for the Europeans. So Europe still wins in the long run.
Okay, so now you revealed your game plan completely.
Yeah, well, it's not very subtle, but it's out there now.
Hey, thanks a lot, guys, for coming, and all the best for the release of the album. Anything you want to say as a closure to all the fans?
Just thanks for giving a shit, basically. We feel unbelievably lucky to be doing this, and it's surreal that we are at this point in our career and doing headline tours, and every single person who bothers to listen to our music, we could not do this without you, so thank you.
Thanks.